In the heart of Birmingham's working-class outskirts, tucked away between rows of aging brick buildings and corner stores selling everything from halal meat to old VHS tapes, stood a small, unassuming mosque. It was called Masjid al-Rahman, a name that meant, the Mosque of the Most Merciful. To a passerby, it was just another quiet structure, faded cream walls, a modest green dome that had long lost its shine, and a wooden sign that creaked with every gust of wind. But to those who prayed inside, it was a sanctuary. A place not just of worship, but of healing. A second home for many of Birmingham's forgotten. The mosque had been standing for over 4 decades, built by Pakistani and Bangladeshi immigrants who had arrived in the 70s with little more than dreams and determination. Over the years, its walls had witnessed tears of hardship and laughter of Eid celebrations. Yet something had begun to change. A strange energy lingered in the air, subtle at first, like the whisper of a breeze before a storm. It began with lights. One night, the dome of Masjid al-Rahman glowed faintly. Not from inside, the mosque was closed, but from the outside. It wasn't artificial light. No lamps. No drones. Just a pale, ethereal glow hovering gently around the dome. Passers-by noticed it, took videos, and uploaded them online. Some called it a camera glitch. Others dismissed it as a reflection of city lights. But the local believers knew something deeper was stirring. Imam Abdul Basit, the elderly imam of the mosque, was a man of few words and immense presence. His beard was white as snow, his eyes tired yet glowing with wisdom. He never commented on the light, nor did he deny it. Instead, he continued leading prayers, reciting verses that seemed to pierce through the hearts of those listening. One of the mosque's regular attendees, 26-year-old Yusuf, had once been lost to the streets. Drugs, fights, stolen motorbikes. But the first time he heard Abdul Basit recite Surah Yasin during Far, he broke down in tears and never left the mosque again. "Something is happening here," Yusuf whispered to his friend Tariq one evening. "It's like Allah is closer here. Like the air itself listens." But not everyone was at peace. Across town, in a quiet but heavily secured MI5 operations center, screens flickered with live surveillance footage. The government had taken interest in the recent buzz around Masjid al-Rahman. Several clips had gone viral showing the glowing dome, people claiming to hear Quranic recitations from the mosque at midnight, when it was locked. Others spoke of dreams where they saw angels standing guard at its doors. "Unverified mysticism, most likely," said Agent Sarah Mills, scrolling through Reddit threads. "But still, too much online traction to ignore." Her superior, Agent David Coleman, watched silently. A man of precision in science, David had worked on anti-terror operations, cyber intelligence, and international espionage. He wasn't religious. In fact, he avoided anything spiritual. But he couldn't deny what he saw in the satellite images. A pattern. Every full moon for the past 3 months, the dome lit up. Always at the same time. Always when the mosque was empty. "We'll run a discreet operation," he said at last. "No alarms. No raids. Just passive observation. I want all data, thermal scans, sound frequencies, electromagnetic readings." "Understood," replied Mills. "Shall I inform local council?" "No. This stays internal." Meanwhile, inside Masjid al-Rahman, something else stirred. It was late. The mosque had closed for the night. Imam Abdul Basit sat alone in the back room, fingers gliding over an ancient book. The pages weren't printed, they were handwritten. Arabic, but also older languages layered beneath, like Syriac and Hebrew. A single candle burned beside him. As he turned the page, a breeze swept through the closed room. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Ya Allah, your test is near." Unbeknownst to him, one of the mosque's junior caretakers, Tariq, stood quietly outside the door, listening. He had noticed the imam acting differently lately, staying late, hiding books, locking the basement. And Tariq was curious. Not out of concern, but greed. For months, Tariq had been messaging with an anonymous contact online, claiming to have access to Islamic relics, with unknown power. The contact, a broker of ancient religious artifacts, promised Tariq thousands of pounds if he could deliver a physical item that proved the supernatural claims swirling around the mosque. A book, a relic, even soil from the site, the man had written. Anything. Tariq, tempted by the money and growing impatient, had made up his mind. The next day, as Friday prayers gathered a full congregation, Tariq slipped into the basement. The hallway was dim and filled with a stillness that made his skin crawl. At the far end, behind a rusted iron gate, was a small wooden chest bound in brass. It looked ancient, covered in calligraphy and seals that pulsed faintly in the dark. He reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the latch, a jolt surged through his body like lightning. He was thrown back against the wall with a scream that no one heard upstairs. The lights flickered. A voice, deep, unearthly, echoed in the narrow basement. The betrayer shall not touch the trust. Tariq lay on the floor, eyes wide in terror, gasping for air. He crawled backward, trembling, his mind reeling. What was that? He whispered, but no answer came. Only silence. Heavy. Watching. Upstairs, Imam Abdul Basit paused mid-sermon. His eyes narrowed as if he had just heard something no one else did. He turned toward the Qibla and whispered, "Forgive him, O Lord, or test him gently." Back in the MI5 surveillance room, Agent Coleman's team had just picked up a sharp electromagnetic spike from the mosque's coordinates. All monitors blinked. Frequencies scrambled. Thermal imaging showed a sudden drop of 10 degrees inside the building. Agent Mills looked alarmed. That wasn't natural. Coleman leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Prepare the field team. We're going in. A cold wind swept through the streets of Birmingham as dusk began to fall. Streetlights buzzed to life, casting golden halos over the wet pavements. Inside the MI5 mobile operations van parked discreetly 2 blocks from Masjid al-Rahman, Agent David Coleman adjusted the earpiece nestled under his coat collar. The room inside the van pulsed with muted voices, flickering monitors, and the low hum of encrypted radio chatter. Team Alpha, report visual, Coleman said sharply. A voice crackled in. No movement outside the mosque. A few locals walking by. The Imam just finished Maghrib prayers. Lights are off now. Coleman tapped a tablet screen. EM signature? Still fluctuating, sir. Agent Mills responded from behind a monitor. Spiked again 10 minutes ago. Then dropped completely. It's like something turns it on and off at will. Coleman's jaw tightened. Like it's alive? Mills didn't answer. Despite his long career in intelligence, David Coleman had never encountered a sight that defied their surveillance. Their cameras, installed covertly in lampposts and rooftops, kept going dark. Their drones couldn't lock on GPS near the mosque. And just last night, an advanced infrared device had shut down permanently when focused on the mosque's dome. We're being blocked, Mills had said. But by what? Now, as the van rattled with soft vibrations, Coleman knew it was time to escalate. Tonight, he said quietly, we enter. In another part of the city, Yusuf stood beneath a flickering street lamp near the mosque. He had a habit of walking alone after each prayer, his mind quiet, his heart wrestling with questions. Tonight was different. The mosque felt heavier, as if the air inside carried a burden. As he approached the courtyard wall, he noticed something. A black SUV. No license plate. Windows tinted too dark. He narrowed his eyes. MI5, he muttered. They're watching. Yusuf quickly turned and slipped into the alley, pulling out his phone. He sent a short encrypted message to an unknown number. They're moving. Tonight. Inside the mosque, Imam Abdul Basit remained seated on the prayer mat long after the congregation had left. The lights were dim, the marble tiles cold beneath him. In front of him sat the ancient book, wrapped now in a thick cloth, tied with thread made from palm leaves. He knew this night would come. He had been warned long ago, not by man, but by a dream he'd had during the last 10 nights of Ramadan. In the dream, he stood at the edge of a great ocean, and the waves whispered verses of the Qur'an in voices not of this world. "You are not the guardian," they told him, "but the keeper for those who will believe." A knock echoed from the front doors. He stood slowly. Steady. Calm. Yusuf entered, his face pale. "Sheikh, they're here." MI5. Coleman himself. Abdul Basit nodded. "Then Allah has brought the hour." Back at MI5's command vehicle, the team was gearing up. Armored vests. Taser guns. Night vision goggles. No lethal weapons yet. This was labeled a non-hostile high anomaly operation. Coleman led the team, wearing a sleek black coat and earpiece. He turned to Mills. "Keep comms open. If we don't respond in 10 minutes, pull us out." "Yes, sir." The agents exited the van, moving in silent formation. Their boots crunched over the wet pavement as they approached the mosque. Just as they reached the front gate, the wind stilled. A strange quiet blanketed the area, muting the sound of the city. Coleman was the first to reach the entrance. He reached out and pushed the door. It creaked open. No alarms. No locks. No resistance. They stepped inside. The mosque was still and dimly lit, the scent of oud lingering in the air. The prayer mats were aligned perfectly. A few Qur'ans lay on the side shelves. And at the front, beneath the mihrab, sat Imam Abdul Basit. He didn't stand. He simply looked up, and his eyes met Coleman's. "You are welcome," the Imam said softly, "if you come in peace." Coleman hesitated. He had faced drug lords, cybercriminals, spies. Yet this old man's gaze unsettled him more than any terrorist ever had. There was no fear. No anger. Only stillness. "We're here to investigate some unusual activity," Coleman said formally. "You are aware that the dome of this mosque has been emitting light visible on satellite imaging?" "I am," the Imam replied. "There have also been electromagnetic pulses strong enough to shut down military-grade equipment." "Yes. And ancient relics, texts of unknown origin, are believed to be stored here." The Imam nodded again. "You're not wrong." Coleman furrowed his brow. "We would like to see them." "With respect." The Imam looked past him. "You may try. But only the sincere can approach." Coleman glanced at his team. They spread out, scanning walls, checking doorways. One agent, Harris, began walking toward the back hallway, toward the basement. Yusuf suddenly stepped between him and the path. "No one goes there," Yusuf said firmly. Coleman stepped in. "We don't need confrontation. Just cooperation." Abdul Basit slowly stood. His presence seemed to expand, though he was not tall. He walked forward, placing a gentle hand on Yusuf's shoulder. "Let them try." The Imam turned to Coleman. "You seek the truth. But be warned, truth does not bend for curiosity." Agent Harris and 2 others walked toward the hallway. It was darker there, the lights flickering unnaturally. As they reached the door to the basement, their flashlights began to fail. One by one, they dimmed and died. A chill filled the corridor. Harris touched the doorknob, and recoiled. "It's freezing," he whispered. Another agent pushed the door. It opened with a groan. Inside, the basement stairs descended into shadows. The team moved cautiously, every step echoing unnaturally loud. The moment their feet hit the bottom floor, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The wooden chest sat in the center, glowing faintly even through its cloth covering. Harris approached it. "This is it," he said over the radio. "Confirm visual." Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. The lights exploded. Not outward but inward, as if sucked into a void. Then came the voice. "This is not yours to claim." All three agents screamed as an invisible force slammed into their chests, throwing them backward. Coleman, still upstairs, heard the chaos through his earpiece. "Team? Team, report." Only static replied. He turned to the Imam, furious. "What is this? What are you hiding?" Imam Abdul Basit met his anger with silence. Then finally he said, "I am hiding nothing. It is you who must uncover yourself." Coleman stared at him, breathing heavily. Outside, sirens had begun to approach. Word had gotten out. Protesters, media vans, and curious bystanders were flooding the streets. Something big was happening, and the city had begun to notice. Inside the mosque, however, something even bigger was awakening. The chaos in the basement left a heavy silence behind it. 3 of MI5's best agents now lay unconscious at the foot of the stairs. They had been repelled by something unseen, something powerful. Agent Coleman stood frozen in the main prayer hall of Masjid al-Rahman, struggling to process what had just happened. His radio crackled with broken signals. The basement was now radio dead. Static swallowed everything. Imam Abdul Basit did not flinch. He stood with his hands folded, eyes half closed, as though listening to a conversation none of the others could hear. Around them, Yusuf and a few other young worshippers had gathered, tense but calm, unarmed, yet unafraid. A deep hush settled inside the mosque, broken only by the distant wail of approaching sirens outside. The world was coming closer, yet this space felt farther away than ever. Coleman looked the Imam in the eyes. "I don't believe in magic tricks," he said, his voice sharp. "I believe in physics, cause and effect. There's a force field down there? Fine. How? What causes it? Technology? Radiation?" The Imam smiled faintly. "Not everything that exists, Agent Coleman, fits your definition of how." "I need that book," Coleman pressed. "Or whatever device is emitting that energy. Otherwise, I have no choice but to escalate." The Imam didn't answer directly. Instead, he simply asked, "And if the thing you seek destroys you?" In the shadows of the side corridor, a figure listened. Tariq. He had returned to the mosque after fleeing in fear from the basement. But his fear had not evolved into repentance. It had evolved into bitterness. Why him? Why was he rejected? He had seen it with his own eyes, the chest, the light, the invisible voice that knocked him down. But why was the Imam allowed to go near it? Why was Yusuf always trusted? Tariq had been a volunteer for years. He knew the mosque, the Imam's habits, the lock combinations. Yet now, he felt like a stranger in his own house of worship. The contact had messaged again. "We will pay £250,000 for physical proof." A page. A fragment. Even an object. Tariq's hands trembled around his phone. Outside the mosque, MI5 was reassembling. More agents had arrived. Drones flew overhead. The small Birmingham neighborhood was now surrounded by temporary fences and blinking blue lights. Protesters, some defending the mosque, others accusing it of being a front for extremism, had started to gather. News vans from BBC and Sky News began parking across the street. Inside, MI5's tech unit was preparing a second attempt. "We've recalibrated the signal interference," said Mills to Coleman through a secure line. "We'll send in a specialized rover drone, no human risk this time." Coleman gave a silent nod. But his mind was elsewhere. That voice in the basement. That presence. He wasn't a superstitious man. But what he felt down there wasn't radiation. It wasn't heat or shock. It was refusal. As if the mosque itself had declared them unworthy. That evening, prayers resumed as usual. Despite the media storm, the mosque held its ground. Dozens of Muslims lined up for Isha prayer under the same dome that had now become the center of an international controversy. The faithful didn't care. Their hearts were anchored in something deeper. Imam Abdul Basit's recitation that night shook the walls. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. A niche within which is a lamp, the lamp enclosed in glass, the glass as if it were a pearly star. Those who listened wept quietly. Outside, Coleman watched from the van's monitor, eyes scanning each worshipper, searching for weakness. That's when he noticed Tariq, slipping toward the back room. Pause video. Zoom in. Who is that? He asked. Tariq Jamil. Age 33. Registered caretaker. No criminal record. But wait. Mills narrowed her eyes. We intercepted a message from this phone number earlier. It was encrypted. Trace it. Seconds passed. A red dot pinged on the map. Same sender offering black market buyers relics of religious origin. She whispered. Private server. He's trying to sell something. Coleman stood up instantly. He's the crack in the wall. Let's move. Inside the mosque, Tariq moved swiftly but nervously. He had waited until after prayer, slipped past the worshippers, and headed for the storage room beside the imam's office. He knew the code to the back door. He'd watched the patterns of patrols. Now was his chance. He entered the old wooden room that led to the basement stairs. The air was cold again, but less violent than before. He paused. What if it happened again? He clenched his teeth and opened a small metal box tucked in his bag. Inside, a scalpel, a vacuum-seal bag, and a pair of heat-resistant gloves. This time, he wouldn't touch the chest directly. He would cut a small piece of the cloth wrapped around it, seal it, and leave before sunrise. It would be enough for proof and payment. As he approached the bottom, the light began again. Pale like before. The air hummed. But he didn't stop. He reached the chest. The cloth glowed but did not resist him this time. Slowly, his hand lifted the edge. Just a tiny cut. But the moment the blade touched the fabric, a deep vibration rattled the floor. Tariq staggered back. The air grew heavy, pressing against his chest. He gasped. A voice, low and echoing, filled the room. He who trades truth for silver has lost both. A searing pain shot up his arm. He screamed, dropping the scalpel. His hand, blistered and shaking, looked as though it had touched fire. He turned to flee. But someone stood at the top of the stairs. Agent David Coleman. Tariq, Coleman said slowly, descending the steps. I believe we have some things to discuss. Tariq froze. Sweat poured from his face. His lips trembled. You don't understand, he stammered. This thing, it's real. It's dangerous. I know, Coleman replied. I saw what it did to my men. I can't go back down there, Tariq whispered, clutching his arm. It doesn't want us. Coleman looked past him at the glowing chest. Something about its presence, even from this distance, pulled at him. Not like a weapon. Not like a threat. Like a question. You were trying to sell it, he said flatly. Tariq didn't deny it. Coleman knelt beside him. Tell me what it is. I don't know, Tariq whispered. But it speaks. It knows things. I touched it once and I saw something. What? My own funeral. Coleman was silent. He rose to his feet and stared at the chest. The light shimmered. He turned to Tariq. You've done enough damage. Get out of here. Tariq, shocked, nodded. You're not going to arrest me? Not tonight. Coleman stood alone now in the basement, the chest glowing before him. He stepped forward. He wanted answers, not as an agent, but as a man who had spent his entire life believing the world ran on logic. This chest, this mosque, this presence, it defied everything. He reached out his hand. The light pulsed. and the room fell silent. Agent David Coleman had touched many things in his life: evidence bags containing blood-stained knives, coded devices from terror cells, even a radioactive briefcase once recovered from an Eastern European smuggler. But never in his entire career had his hand trembled like this. He stood alone in the basement of Masjid al-Rahman, eyes fixed on the ancient chest glowing with soft, shifting light that seemed to recognize his presence. He took a breath, steadying himself, and extended his fingers. The light didn't repel him, not like it had done with the others. It pulsed slowly, like the rhythm of a calm heartbeat. He hesitated, then let his fingertips graze the cloth covering the chest. No shock. No rejection. Just warmth. Gentle, like sunlight through closed eyelids. Upstairs, chaos brewed again. MI5 had received word from the street. An anonymous tip claimed that the mosque was harboring classified weaponized spiritual material. The phrasing was absurd, but enough to ignite a reaction. In the operations van, Agent Mills stared at her screen, frustrated and afraid. "We're losing the narrative," she said aloud. "Every journalist in Britain is parked outside. Social media is exploding." Protests outside had doubled. Some carried signs that read, "Protect our mosques," while others yelled, "No sacred exceptions to the law." But inside the mosque? Silence. Sacred. Almost out of time. Back in the basement, Coleman slowly began to unwrap the cloth. The moment the final layer fell away, revealing the chest's surface, carved in a language he didn't recognize, a faint vibration moved through the air. It wasn't sound, not really. It was understanding. A communication without words. The chest was covered in ancient calligraphy, Arabic yes, but woven with what looked like Aramaic and something older, geometric symbols, rhythmic inscriptions, and something that felt alive. Not in a horror movie sense, but in a sacred, watchful way. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm, but it was Yusuf. Yusuf didn't say anything. He looked pale but composed, as if he'd known this moment was coming. "Why didn't it stop you?" Yusuf finally asked. "I don't know," Coleman replied. "It stopped everyone else." "You don't even believe in God." Coleman looked at him. "Not yet." Yusuf walked closer and looked at the chest. "This isn't just any book, you know." "I figured," Coleman murmured. Yusuf pointed to one of the carvings. "This symbol means trust of light. It's not just scripture. It's something else. Sheikh Abdul Basit says the book contains layers of revelation, some already in the Qur'an, others meant only for the time before the end." "And you keep that, here? In a basement?" Coleman asked. "Where else?" Yusuf said with a soft smile. "Where no one thinks to look." At that moment, upstairs in the prayer hall, Sheikh Abdul Basit was standing alone before the mihrab. The call to Tahajjud, the night prayer, had not been made, but the Imam stood, whispering verses to himself. He had felt the shift. Something had been allowed. Something had been opened. Suddenly, one of the mosque administrators ran in. "Sheikh! There's an order coming down. MI5 wants to breach. They're saying a full extraction is imminent. No more covert observation." The Imam didn't flinch. "They are afraid," he said. "Not of the mosque. Of what they don't understand." He walked calmly to the center of the hall and raised his hands. "Everyone," he said aloud to those still praying or resting on mats. "It is time. Not to run, but to witness." Back in the basement, Coleman could hear something. Whispers. Not from Yusuf. Not from above. From inside the chest. He leaned in closer, the carvings beginning to shimmer under his gaze. The whispers weren't in any language he could name, yet somehow, they made sense. Snippets of verses he had heard during mosque surveillance, phrases that had stuck in his mind even when he didn't want them to. Indeed, we have sent it down as an Arabic Qur'an so that you may understand. And those whom Allah guides, none can misguide them. There is a light within them and they walk in its glow. His heart raced. He turned to Yusuf. Can this be studied? Like decoded? Translated? Yusuf shook his head slowly. Not by force. Not like a machine. You don't unlock it with brains. You unlock it with heart. Coleman sat down, exhausted. I wasn't raised for this. I was trained to break codes, arrest threats. My job is to protect Britain, not to decode divine relics. Yusuf looked at him with surprising compassion. Maybe protecting Britain means protecting this too. Suddenly, the floor rumbled gently. A signal buzzed in Coleman's earpiece. Sir, this is Mills. We've just received direct authorization from Central Command. Breach order confirmed. They think there's a potential energy weapon. You have 4 minutes to extract. Coleman stood slowly. His entire career had taught him to obey without delay. But this was not an ordinary operation anymore. He turned the radio off. I'm not done here, he said to no one in particular. Yusuf raised an eyebrow. You're defying MI5? No, Coleman replied. I'm finally listening. Outside the mosque, riot police and a full tactical team prepared for a breach. Protesters were pushed back. Drones buzzed. The street was lit like a war zone. Inside, Sheikh Abdul Basit stood before the doors, hands raised in dua. O Allah, you are the owner of the unseen. You are the guardian of the heavens and the earth. Make truth evident, and protect your house. The moment the first agent touched the door with a ram, something extraordinary happened. A sound deep, ancient, like earth itself groaning, roared through the street. All lights in the radius blew out. Phones died. Drones crashed. The door of the mosque lit up, not with fire, but with golden radiance. No one could enter. Not by force. Not anymore. Back in the basement, Coleman's hand rested on the chest once more. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. Instead, he closed his eyes. And in the silence, a single tear fell. He saw himself, alone, in his childhood room, crying silently after his mother's death. He saw his father, distant and rigid, telling him men don't cry. He saw the years he'd buried those emotions under medals, promotions, and logic. And then he saw light. Not blinding. Not burning. Just light. He whispered, barely audible. God, if you're real, show me. The chest glowed brighter, and the room filled with a warmth that couldn't be described. And in that moment, Agent David Coleman didn't find proof. He found peace. The silence that followed was not absence, but presence. Agent David Coleman sat cross-legged in the dimly lit basement of Masjid al-Rahman, his back leaning against the cold wall, his eyes fixed on the glowing chest that had refused to be conquered, decoded, or dismantled. It had spoken to him, not in sentences, not in any human tongue, but in memory, in stillness, in light. Something inside him had shifted, something irreversible. He no longer felt like an agent on a mission. He felt like a man who had seen a truth too vast to fit in files or case reports. Above him, the world continued to spin in chaos. MI5's command center had lost all connection with Coleman's earpiece. The tactical breach had failed in the most inexplicable way. As officers approached the mosque, lights across the entire street had burst with a loud pop, and surveillance feeds had gone black. An electromagnetic surge of unknown origin had scrambled communications. Agent Sarah Mills was panicking. His comm is offline. His body cam's dead. No signal. No thermal. It's like he vanished. She told her superior on a secure line. Pull him out. I don't care how, barked the voice on the other end. If we lose control of this, you'll be explaining to Parliament why we were outmaneuvered by a neighborhood mosque. Mills hesitated. Sir? I don't think this is a tactical failure. It's something else. Something we can't quantify. Then quantify the consequences. The voice snapped. Outside the mosque, police had formed barricades. Reporters from multiple networks crowded behind metal fencing, shouting questions. Protesters waved signs, and some groups clashed, defenders of the mosque versus those claiming it hid mystic terrorism. The air was thick with confusion, fear, and the strange scent of burning electronics. Inside the mosque, however, tranquility still reigned. In the prayer hall, Imam Abdul Basit stood before a small group of elders and youth. The electricity had gone, but candles glowed around the space, casting a soft warmth. He held the Qur'an in his hand and addressed them calmly. Tonight the test is not only for those outside, he said. It is for us too. Will we defend with anger or with patience? Will we protect this house by force, or by trust? One of the younger men, Adil, clenched his fists. But Sheikh, they're accusing us of hiding weapons. Even now, some want to burn the mosque. Do we just stand by? The Imam placed a hand on his shoulder. Adil, fire can burn wood. But it cannot touch light. This place is not protected by walls. It is protected by La ilaha illallah. In that moment, a calm descended. Even the most restless among them began to breathe slower, hearts heavy but steady. Downstairs, Coleman still sat by the chest, now joined again by Yusuf, who had brought a lantern and a thermos of warm water. You should eat something, Yusuf offered. I'm not hungry, Coleman murmured. But thanks. Yusuf sat down next to him. My father died when I was 11, Yusuf began. He was a bricklayer. Very simple man. But I remember him waking me up every far to sit in the masjid, even when I didn't understand the prayer. I used to ask him why. What did he say? Coleman asked. Yusuf smiled. He said, because the prayer will understand you, even if you don't understand it yet. Coleman let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sigh. That's beautiful. It's the same with this. Yusuf gestured to the chest. You're trying to understand it with logic, but maybe it's already trying to understand you through mercy. For a moment neither spoke. Then Coleman asked, why hasn't your government weaponized this? If it's that powerful, why not hide it in some underground vault in Riyadh or Cairo? Yusuf shook his head. Because it's not for them. It chose this place. This random mosque in a British suburb? No place is random, Yusuf replied. Allah chooses where to place his signs. Sometimes in deserts, sometimes in caves, sometimes in Birmingham. Coleman looked away, thinking hard. His training, his mission, everything he had built his life on, none of it had prepared him for a glowing chest whispering verses from Scripture. And yet, it felt right. Suddenly, heavy boots echoed from the corridor upstairs. The door to the basement burst open. It was Agent Mills, flanked by two tactical officers in full gear, their helmets reflecting the faint light from the lantern. Sir, she said sharply. We need to extract immediately. Orders from Central. Coleman didn't move. Sir, with all due respect, this is now a level 6 breach of operational conduct. If you don't come with us now, they'll classify you as compromised. Still, Coleman sat silently. Mills stepped forward. David, what happened to you? He looked up at her, and his face, usually stern, unreadable, was soft, almost serene. I found something, he said. Or it found me. Found what? She asked, her voice trembling. You're sounding like one of them. He smiled. Maybe that's the point. One of the tactical officers raised his comms device. HQ, we have the target. Preparing for extraction. Coleman stood up slowly. No. Mills froze. What? I'm not leaving. And I'm not letting you take this. He gestured to the chest. You don't have that authority. I do. Coleman interrupted. I'm the highest-ranking officer on this operation. I'm invoking Protocol 17. Mill's eyes widened. That's only for nuclear. Exactly. His tone had changed. Calm, but commanding. We are not dealing with ordinary tech here. This is something else entirely. And if we treat it like a weapon, we'll invite disaster. Mills looked at him, horrified and bewildered. You've changed. I've awakened. A long pause filled the basement. Then, reluctantly, Mills lowered her tablet and signaled the officers to stand down. I'll mark the area as sealed, she muttered. But I can't protect you from what's coming next. I know, Coleman said. But maybe it's worth it. She turned to leave, then paused. You'll have to explain this someday. To someone. Parliament, the agency, the world. Coleman looked back at the chest. Then I'll need to start learning how to explain faith. Above them, a strange calm had settled outside the mosque as well. The media had stopped shouting. The police had stopped advancing. And in the sky, beyond the clouded glow of city lights, stars began to appear, sharper and clearer than anyone had seen them in years. As if the heavens themselves were watching. Inside the prayer hall, the Imam raised his hands once more. O Allah, show them what hearts can see when eyes are blind. And in the basement, David Coleman bowed his head, not in surrender, not in defeat, but in reflection. For the first time in his life, he whispered, Ameen. By morning, Masjid al-Rahman was on every screen across the globe. News anchors, podcasters, bloggers, everyone had latched onto the unfolding mystery. The headlines were increasingly surreal. British mosque emits light-blocking military tech, miracle or hoax? MI5 agent refuses extraction, seeks spiritual protection. Birmingham Mosque now a no-fly zone as drones crash mysteriously. Cleric claims ancient book holds divine truth, UK Parliament demands inquiry. Outside the mosque, crowds swelled beyond capacity. Supporters formed human chains to protect its walls. Others held signs demanding its immediate closure. The UK's Prime Minister was pressured to take a stance, but his press secretary issued only one statement. We are investigating the anomaly with utmost seriousness. No religious community will be targeted unjustly, but no one is above national law. Tension crackled in the air like dry leaves before fire. Yet inside the mosque, there was no panic. No protest. Only serenity. Imam Abdul Basit stood with a Qur'an in his hand, watching the sun's golden rays pierce through the latticework windows of the prayer hall. He turned to his congregation, many of them refugees, laborers, students, those whom the world never cared to spotlight. He spoke gently. You are not just protecting a building. You are guarding a message. Allah does not test the people except to raise them. A murmur of assent moved through the room. The worshippers were tired, many sleepless, but they were firm. The mosque had become more than stone and carpet. It had become a beacon. A proof. And in the basement, that beacon still pulsed quietly in the chest of light. Agent David Coleman hadn't moved much since the night before. He now sat on a cushion provided by Yusuf, scribbling thoughts in a small notepad, notes not for a case file, but for his own soul. He had started listing things he couldn't explain. Why the light didn't harm him. Why the chest spoke, in memories. Why he felt peace where there should have been fear. Yusuf was nearby, reading Qur'an aloud in a low, rhythmic voice. Even without fully understanding Arabic, Coleman found the sound grounding. This is what your men should have heard first, Yusuf said between recitations. Not commands. Not accusations. Just verses. Just meaning. Coleman looked up. And what does this verse say? Yusuf read again, then translated. Indeed, this Quran guides to that which is most upright and gives glad tidings to the believers who do righteous deeds. Surah Al-Isra, 17:9. Coleman nodded. That's powerful. Powerful because it doesn't demand, Yusuf replied. It invites. Just then, Coleman's phone buzzed. It was still on low battery, miraculously functional even when every MI5 device upstairs had died. He answered cautiously. Mill's voice came through, calm but strained. They're preparing to remove you by force. Parliament wants answers. Central Intelligence has sent diplomats. Even the Pentagon is calling. And what are you telling them? He asked. That I'm waiting on your report. He hesitated. I have no report. Only a question. What question? Why is it that when all logic fails, only faith remains? Mills didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice softened. David, you're being turned into a symbol. People are already saying you've converted. Coleman's breath caught. I haven't. But maybe. I'm being called. Upstairs, as the mosque began preparations for their prayer, Sheikh Abdul Basit walked slowly into the courtyard, his white robe fluttering in the breeze. A large crowd had formed outside the gates, media, worshippers, protesters, MI5 units, interfaith leaders, and curious strangers. All of them paused when the Imam raised his hand. Peace be upon all who seek truth, he said loudly, his voice clear. I am not a politician. I am not a threat. I am only a servant of Allah, protector of what has been entrusted here for generations. You may call it relic or myth, but those who have stood before it know that no man controls it. A journalist shouted, What is in the box? The Imam smiled. A mirror. Laughter erupted in parts of the crowd. But the faithful knew what he meant. It shows the arrogant their weakness. It shows the sincere their heart. And if a man stands before it hollow, he will leave shattered. The tension broke momentarily when an elderly Christian priest stepped forward, Father Patrick O'Donnell of St. Agnes Church. I've come not to question, but to understand, the priest said. If this is truly divine, then perhaps it is not meant only for Muslims. Sheikh Basit nodded. Truth fears no seeker. Come. The gates opened. The priest entered the mosque slowly, respectfully, and was welcomed with warmth. Many among the crowd looked on, shocked, confused, but deeply moved. A live feed broadcast the moment worldwide. A priest and a sheikh walking side by side into a mosque that the state couldn't touch. Back in the basement, the light of the chest intensified gently. The surface shimmered, and once again, Coleman felt drawn toward it. He looked at Yusuf. Can I open it? Yusuf's eyes widened slightly. No one has. Not even you? I'm not the one it called. Coleman knelt before the chest. He closed his eyes. If this is real, he thought, then let me see truth, not to possess it, but to serve it. With slow, reverent motion, he placed both hands on the lid. It didn't burn. It didn't resist. The chest opened. Inside was not what he expected. There was no weapon. No glowing orb. No magical tablet. Only a single book. Thick. Worn. Written in ancient ink on parchment that smelled of cedar and desert rain. The text was Arabic, but also different. More layered. More alive. Each page seemed to breathe. He touched it lightly. A single verse echoed in his head, one he had heard Yusuf recite earlier. Indeed, we sent down the reminder, and we will surely guard it. Surah Al-Hijr, 15:9. His eyes welled with tears. Do you know what this is? Yusuf asked softly. Coleman nodded slowly. It's not just a book. No, Yusuf said. It's a bridge. Outside, the air changed again. Birds that had disappeared in the tension-filled morning began to return. The breeze smelled sweeter. Even the protesters quieted as news spread through the crowd that the chest had been opened, and the agent who opened it hadn't died, but had dropped to his knees in tears. Some began to cry. Some began to pray. Some began to doubt everything they thought they knew. Inside the mosque, Father O'Donnell watched the people pray. Then he turned to Sheikh Basit. What happens now? The Imam looked toward the mihrab. Now? We wait. For what? For the world to decide what to do when it finally sees the light. Night once again draped itself over Birmingham. But this night did not come with fear or tension. It came with a strange stillness, like the pause before a new breath is drawn. Masjid al-Rahman stood quiet. No longer just a building, it was now a symbol. Not of defiance, but of divine mystery. Governments had failed to contain it. Scientists had failed to explain it. Protesters had lost the voice to shout at it. And still, the chest in the basement glowed softly. Downstairs, Agent David Coleman, or rather, Dawood as he had quietly begun to call himself, sat with the open book before him. It had no title on the cover, no author's name. Only lines of ancient calligraphy that moved like ink caught in slow motion. He didn't speak. He didn't question. He just read. With each verse, his mind cleared. With each page, his heart softened. What had once felt foreign now felt familiar. He felt like a man returning to a home he never knew he had left. Yusuf sat nearby, watching quietly, a small smile playing on his lips. Sheikh Abdul Basit said you would see what others couldn't, Yusuf finally said. Dawood looked up. And what exactly am I seeing? Yusuf replied. That truth doesn't live in a vault, or a laboratory. It lives in submission. Dawood nodded. Islam. No, Yusuf corrected gently. Surrender. That's what Islam means. And now that you've surrendered, the book has opened to you. Outside the mosque, the media was growing restless again. The British Home Office had called an emergency session in Parliament. The Prime Minister had received calls from over 12 nations demanding transparency. Whispers of religious weaponry, psychic warfare, and even divine anomaly were being thrown around with increasing desperation. But nothing could penetrate the mosque. Every attempt to approach the basement failed. Drones died. Machinery froze. Even electronic pens stopped working within 50 feet of the chest. It wasn't just technology, it was intention that was being weighed. And only the sincere were allowed in. MI5, embarrassed by their failure, had ordered Agent Sarah Mills to extract Dawood Coleman. By any means necessary. She had refused. Her resignation letter, submitted just hours ago, was now trending online. Back inside, Sheikh Abdul Basit met with Dawood privately in the main hall. The mosque was mostly empty. Candles cast long shadows on the ornate rug. Outside the arched windows, moonlight filtered through the lattice. You've changed, the sheikh said. I've been changed, Dawood replied. By something greater than me. The Imam smiled. Then it's time. For what? The Imam stepped aside and motioned toward a group of elders. They held a small basin of water, a plain white robe, and a scroll of Arabic text. Time for you to return to the one who has been calling you all along. Dawood stood still, then nodded slowly. A few minutes later, under the silence of the dome, Dawood recited words he had never imagined would come from his mouth. Ashhadu alla ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah. The Shahida. The declaration of faith. His voice was steady. His heart, lighter than it had ever been. Yusuf embraced him, tears streaming. The elders wept. Even the Imam's eyes glistened. At that moment, the chest in the basement gave off a single, final pulse of golden light. And then dimmed. Not because the miracle had ended, but because it was now complete. That same moment, around the world, strange things began to happen. In Indonesia, a Buddhist monk reportedly saw a dream of a golden dome rising in the west. In Nigeria, a Christian pastor who had denounced Islam felt compelled to read the Qur'an for the first time, and did so, openly, on live television. In a village in Peru, a man who had never heard the word Islam stood up during a community prayer and said, "There is only one God, and Muhammad is his messenger," all within minutes of Dawood's declaration. It was as if the light that had guarded Masjid al-Rahman had sent ripples across the earth, not to overwhelm, but to awaken. In London, inside the Houses of Parliament, a heated session came to a halt when one of the Muslim MPs stood and said softly, "I do not know what that book is, but I know what truth looks like when it walks into a room. That mosque is not a threat to this nation. It is a gift." He was met with stunned silence. And then, slowly, applause. 3 days later, the government officially declared Masjid al-Rahman a protected heritage site. Not because of archaeological significance, but because, as the official statement read, "It has become a symbol of harmony, curiosity, and spiritual awakening, beyond borders, beyond politics, and beyond human pride." Dawood was quietly released from his service in MI5. He declined all interviews, turned down book deals, and refused to speak at any political summit. He chose instead to move into a small flat just a few streets away from the mosque. Every morning, he would walk quietly to Masjid al-Rahman. He never touched the chest again. He didn't need to. It had given him everything. Months later, during Ramadan, the mosque opened its doors for an interfaith night. Christians, Jews, Sikhs, atheists, even members of parliament sat together on prayer rugs, listening to the Qur'an being recited. No miracles occurred that night. No glowing domes. No hovering lights. Just peace. And that was the greater miracle. One evening, as Dawood sat in the courtyard reading from a simple English Qur'an, a young boy approached him. "Is it true?" the boy asked. "What?" "That you saw the light." Dawood smiled. "I didn't see it, son. I felt it." The boy tilted his head. "How do you know it was real?" Dawood closed the book and placed a hand over his heart. "Because it changed everything.